Hello and welcome to Dungeoneered, a podcast dedicated to discussing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Josh.
Let's do this. So, from what I understand from our talks coming into this, we're going to be talking a little bit about Toril, and I have literally no idea what Toril is or what it even entails. So I think, Josh, you know a little bit more about D&D lore and D&D world building than I do. I'm just kind of the DM who does things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Toril is and how it works in D&D world?
Yeah, I can do that. So Toril is the planet where all of 5th edition, or most of 5th edition and its campaigns are set. Toril is the planet that the Forgotten Realms is on. Now, Toril was originally called Aber Toril, and it was a land that was actually being fought over by two deity level groups, the gods and the primordials. And the kind of over-god, or the god of gods, his name is Io, and he controls who gets to be and who doesn't get to be a god. So you can do everything like the Raven Queen did and try to become a god and still be rejected by this guy Io.
Does he have a stat block in D&D?
Oh no, most gods, I mean, they at one point during like early on D&D, they tried to give all gods stat blocks, but then they realized, hey, we want these people to be like gods, so let's not give them stat blocks, because if you give them stat blocks, characters are going to throw themselves against them to see if they could defeat that stat block.
Yeah, and level 20 characters are going to be like, we're gods, right? Let's do it.
Exactly. And so they kind of have stayed away from giving god stat blocks. Io would definitely be one that...
He split the world? Or, yes, or there was a fight?
Yeah, so he kind of said, hey, I am going to separate you two, and created a alternate dimension that is in the exact same place. So Aber and Toril, which are the split apart planet, is now called, one's called Aber and one's called Toril. They are in the same place in the universe, technically.
Is there like a D&D setting in Aber?
I don't know if they've actually done a setting there, but there is a setting where they learn about it, because the reason why Aber Toril is such a weird name is because they were named separately, and then when they found out about each other's existence, they were like, oh, so originally we were Aber Toril, I guess.
I literally just imagine like Wizards of the Coast. They're like, okay, we're gonna be working on this cool world, and you guys are gonna be working on the world, and you guys are gonna be working on the world, and then like they split off into two groups, and they just made two different worlds, and they were like, well, crap, what are we gonna do? We have two different worlds, so let's smash them together and then rip them apart. That's what I picture happening in Wizards.
I don't think that's what happened, but that would be funny. But so the primordials went to Aber, and then the gods went to Toril. And so Aber is actually a pretty weird place, because a lot of the things that we take for granted in D&D, in Toril, never existed over there, or at least if they did, they died out because the gods weren't there. Like, you're not going to find like a lot of like god-created races there, so elves and dwarves and whatnot are not going to be there at all.
Oh, so wait. So, like, there are no elves in Toril? Or Aber? Aber?
None at all.
Okay, there's just no, like, it's just, like, elementals? And...
No, there's like, dragons, primordials, dragonborn, stuff like that.
So that's kind of the split, then. The races ended up in Toril, and then everything, like, primordials and dragons.
There's a lot of races there.
Okay.
I think there actually might be some drow and stuff like that there, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But Aber is, as I said, there's a lot of things that we take for granted that are not there at all. Magic is weird there. There's a thing in D&D which is a whole lot of lore to get into, so I'll just leave it at this. It's called the Weave. It's how all magic works in Toril, and it does not exist at all in Aber. Now, I know that
I know nothing about literally anything D&D related when it comes to
I know, so I'm just going to avoid the Weave for now.
And I was like, I don't know if you know anything about the Weave, because maybe like from vague
I know a lot about the Weave because I researched it because I wanted to use it in my game, but kind of twist it. And I called it the Veil.
Oh, okay.
But so the Weave is this kind of, it's like a mesh of magic is how I think of it, that kind of interweaves over the whole entire planet. And every time you cast a spell, you literally pull it and break from the Weave. And so the goddess of magic, Mystra, has to fix every time someone casts a magic. She has to fix the Weave wherever they cast it. And so the higher and higher level spells you cast, the worse and worse the weave gets broken.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and so eventually, like back in old D&D, there were spells above above level 9, and the way that they brought that down is that they were the lore is the weave was getting destroyed so bad that Mistra was having a hard time fixing it when these people were casting 11th, 12th level spells. And also this horrible event happened where Mistra died, and there was no one to repair the weave. And so the magic kind of went crazy. And that was actually, you might have heard of what this setting is called. It's called the Spell Plague.
Nope.
Not at all. Okay.
No idea. I just make my own worlds, man.
Nice. Okay. But yeah, we'll talk about the Spell Plague later. But
yeah.
And so this weave doesn't exist at all. Weave is what allows like wizards to cast spells. And so like Aber has no wizards.
Can you cast spells in Aber?
Yeah. It's just only like sorcerers and warlocks, people that have other ways of getting it. There are no clerics, there are no paladins because there are no gods there.
Oh.
So there's no way to have clerics or paladins. Now, it's really interesting because Aber is kind of a look at what if the gods didn't exist on Toril, what would have happened? Because at that time when the split happened, the same races that were actually created at the time were like evenly split between the two. And so in Aber, dragons rose up, created this massive army pretty much, and just now they rule everything. And they enslave all the other races. Now that didn't happen on Toril because Bahamut and Tiamat rose their children up against each other, and they had this massive civil war that just ravished the dragon community until now they're just kind of as rare as we think of them in D&D, in regular D&D.
Oh, all right.
Most people from Aber are actually like enslaved. If you're a small humanoid, like the average humanoid, the human or orc or whatever, you were probably enslaved if you lived in Toril. I mean, in Aber.
Do you know at all in the D&D setting if like there are people like NPCs and stuff from Aber that have made their way to Toril?
Well, it's pretty much impossible to transfer from one to the other. The only way that they did was the Spell Plague. When Mistra died, magic went crazy. And so what happened was parts of Toril got teleported to Aber, and parts of Aber got teleported to Toril. And so there was this place called Timanthor, and it is the dragonborn main capital. And it got teleported from Aber because there was no dragonborns on Toril until about like 100 years ago or so. And then Timanthor all of a sudden shows up this huge citadel in the Sword Coast. It's kind of off to the side and out of the way, but it's still like this new race. And they were the only dragonborn clan, these Timanthor people, to ever successfully rebel and gain their freedom from dragons.
Jeez, D&D lore is way complicated.
Yes, there is a lot of stuff.
The fifth edition books just make me think like you open up and here are the Dragonborn. They're pretty cool. You're like, yeah, they're really cool. Okay, next.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's what they wanted to do with fifth edition was they kind of wanted to make it approachable and kind of hide the lore a bit, kind of keep it so they wanted people to be more like you, and where they're like, hey, we have a little bit, but we want you to make it, and we want you to feel confident to do your own thing. And so they gave you a little bit here and there, and maybe in the campaigns they probably give you a lot more, but it's still kind of kept back because they want you to have a freedom to put it anywhere.
Yeah, just little spritz here and there, you know? Like here's some cool information about tieflings and such and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so actually like in D&D lore, people are scared of the Dragonborn because like there's people that have lived for thousands of years, these elves and dwarves and whatnot that live for super long time. And all of a sudden there's this new race showing up. And so most people are actually nervous about Dragonborn being there because they're only like here for 100 years now.
Yeah.
And also Dragonborn are very, I don't want to say gruff, but they have a very unique way of doing things in the D&D lore. They hate dragons, just overall. They hate dragons.
That's a different take from what I've heard. I thought Dragonborn were like, you know, Dragonborn, and they're like, they love the dragons and stuff.
Yeah, that's a common misconception. They actually despise dragons so much because they've only been enslaved by them. And even the ones that live, like, if you're playing a current dragonborn in the actual D&D world, your grandpa or your great-grandpa would tell you stories of this other world where he was enslaved by dragons.
Oh,
And so it's really recent that these people are coming over from there.
So much.
And
so much.
So they actually cast people out even if they worship like the good, quotation marks, good dragon god Bahamut. They're like, nah. No dragon is good. Doesn't matter. Because no, there's just no good dragons. And part of Bahamut's teachings is, one, there are good dragons, which we know there are because there are the chromatic dragons. I mean, the not chromatic. That's wrong. Metallic dragons are the good ones.
Yeah.
And so we know there are, but there's just this prejudice that's been built into their society because they've been enslaved for so long. And also they are very headstrong, and they never want to take, it's hard to explain. They look down on people that are clerics or paladins or warlocks in D&D lore because they see...
Wait, the dragons do? The dragonborns or dragons?
Dragonborns.
Okay.
Because they believe they should be powerful in their own right, and they believe that beseeching these powerful beings or whatnot, like, please give me power, like they see that as being weak and feeble.
Yeah, like the gap between a sorcerer versus, a warlock or cleric.
Yeah, but the Dragonborn are super interesting, and I can talk about them forever, but I'm gonna try to get back to Toril.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, Toril's map is actually really interesting. If you pull it up and look at it, it looks an awful lot like our continent, like our world. The continents are all kind of in the right places. They're a little weirdly shaped and different, but overall, it makes sense. And so what they have done is they kind of separated them out in the same way we have them separated out. And so they kind of did a thing, which is actually what I used when I was beginning DMing and trying to create my world for the first time.
Good old Wilkes Nimblefoot.
You look at something you know. That was the horrible, irritating halfling character, halfling
the best
rogue
halfling there ever was.
that he created for my first campaign, and it was so irritating. Oh.
Anyways.
Yeah, I don't like halflings anymore, but so
why?
And so where they separated out, where they separated the kind of continents, what we think of as those regions of the world are the same way they kind of are in this fantasy world. So where Europe is on our map, there is the Sword Coast and Faerun.
Yeah.
And Faerun is kind of the same thing as like medieval Europe with the same type of dragons and whatnot. And most of the major stories happen in Faerun. I actually don't know of any campaigns that take place in any of the other kind of continents. I mean, I know there's the one in Chult.
Yeah, I have no clue. On my map that I'm looking at, Australia is unknown, South America, North America, all unknown. Like, do they have is there lore in there, or is it just like you get to make it up? What's the?
Oh, well, so
do you even know?
I know some of it. I know a lot of it is worked out in like some of the D&D books or kind of hidden, obscure areas where you have to like literally search for it to kind of find it.
Yeah.
But I know the biggest one that most everything takes place in is Faerun. One thing I do know is that most of the races we see today were not the original races when the world began, when these continents were original. Like, you know how we have Pangea, and it was this original connected mass. They had a more centralized mass before, and they have these unique races. I didn't think we were going to get this far into this type of area, so I didn't get the names down. But there was like a reptilian race, a bird race, and like a humanoid race, like a classic humanoid, and they all kind of split off and created what we know as like the Yuan-Ti all the specific things, and the Kenku and the Aarakocra, and like all of those kind of evolved from these main races. What was that?
Except we don't mention Kenkus on this podcast.
Hey, I love Kenku. Don't you dare.
So you were also saying that Faerun,
Faerun?
Faerun. Yeah, I know a lot. Faerun.
You know a lot about D&D lore. What?
Duh. But are most of the so almost all the campaign settings are in Faerun?
Yeah, I mean there's some that start there and then head out. And then oh gosh, I'm thinking what's the one where they go into the
Icewind Dale, that's the newest
Shadowfell?
one.
What is that
Or one of
one
the
with
newest
the
ones.
vampire lord? Now I'm just blanking on that.
I should know this.
Curse of Strahd. There we go.
Yeah.
Curse of
See, I know
Strahd.
something.
I was like,
only
how
know
did
that
I
'cause-
forget that the moment I needed it? Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's all right. I only know that because I think Strahd is really cool.
Strahd is awesome, and that campaign was really cool.
Yeah.
That actually you start in Faerun, and then you kind of get teleported to the Shadowfell.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm not sure where Descent into Avernus actually starts, but
they just like go to hell, right? It's pretty much
that's
what happens.
Avernus is the first layer of hell.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if you also know this. This might be a question that you don't know, but different planes, are they still Toril? Are they not Toril?
I mean,
like if you were to go to hell.
So the ones that are still this world quotation marks are the Feywild and the Shadowfell. They're like altered versions of this world.
Parallel universes.
Yeah. The rest of them are their own like places.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. So now that I've told you a bunch of this lore and kind of went on a few rants here and there,
it's all good
about dragonborns and whatnot. How do you think this could be used for someone trying to create a world of their own?
What do you mean exactly by that?
So we're looking at what lore is there, and I always find it easier to use a piece of lore that someone has took a lot of time and developed, and kind of piggyback on it. You don't take it wholesale, but you use the resources you have.
Make it your own.
Yeah, use resources you have to do less work to create just as interesting a world as someone who takes 10 hours a day to work on this incredibly complex world. Because there's already people getting paid insane amounts of money to do that.
Oh yeah, to sit and make up this awesome lore, yeah.
Because for D&D, for video games, and actual real world lore and real world things that are happening.
Yeah.
So I just decided that the best way to do it is use the people who have their time to do that or make that.
Yeah.
And so is there what kind of stories or things would you kind of use this world lore on? Like I can think of some ways to using the spell plague and the kind of transport of two places to kind of create a context of a campaign where all these people come from Aber or come from whatever the person wants their other world to be, and then they get teleported to this world, and so then there's a closer connection between the player and their character, because the player and the character are both fishes out of water in this new world, and so the fact that the players don't know every little city or every culture in your world, it actually allows them to kind of feel more into the character because the character is just as unsure as they are.
Yeah.
And also, I think that would be really nice for a new DM, because if you start that way, then the world doesn't need to be as fleshed out at immediately. Right. Because the people are going to take their time, and you can kind of have them be in a small town that wouldn't really have a whole lot of knowledge of the rest of the world. And so then you could wait until you feel comfortable to have someone that's super knowledgeable meet the party that could tell them more about the world.
Yeah. The first thing that instantly kind of pops into my head, and this isn't necessarily related to D&D's lore specifically, but how they kind of took kind of like real life and put it into their world, because I think that really helps when creating all sorts of different things. Because when people can look, it's kind of like the same thing as when you play a human in D&D, you feel, kind of like Like I am me essentially in this world. So it's kind of like the same thing, because if you can take different real life aspects and kind of put them into your world, it really helps. And I like how they kind of did that with the map and everything. So that helps a lot when creating a world and having people feel like related, or like, to relate to the world in that manner. The second one I was thinking of also right immediately is kind of the dragonborn storyline, which could be a whole other topic in of itself. But you could easily take how dragons hate the dragonborn, and you could easily like put in a different society that worships and loves dragons, and then instantly have an internal conflict, like instantly have an interesting and fun conflict within your world, where there are say the vast majority of dragonborn don't despise gods, and then the ones that do like gods, they're then like held captive or enslaved, kind of like how the dragonborn used to be enslaved. So you could do all sorts of really cool things just by interjecting this tiny new culture into it. Just this small, like, just take most of what D&D created and then interject this tiny new thing of like, well, some dragonborn, an entire culture of dragonborn really like the dragons and praise their heritage. And then that kind of already creates an internal conflict. And so then when you have
thing, I mean, back to the lore, dragonborn they're their own race. They have no connection to actual dragons. They're not actually dragon related in any way. Like the dragons, dragons, if they have sex with something that's not a dragon, they create a half dragon, which is different than a dragonborn.
Yeah, aren't they like separate monsters in the monster manual?
Yeah, half dragons and dragonborn are different monsters in the monster manual.
Yeah. I mean, but like even then, even not necessarily, like if we even just scrap the ancestry part, you could even just have one group of dragonborn that like dragons and one group of dragonborns that don't. So you could just take all of what D&D already created and then just add a group that does like dragonborn and have this huge conflict.
Yeah.
And then if a character wanted to make a dragonborn and they say made a dragonborn character from the group that likes dragons, you could even have all sorts of cool different significances. Like I don't know if there's any like lore significance behind dragonborn with tails or without tails, but you could easily kind of say like, well, the dragonborn that like dragons and worship dragons or praise dragons, they got their tails cut off by the group that doesn't, and they're now kind of like subservient to them. So you could do like a whole bunch of stuff just by taking
sure actual dragonborn in D&D, they do not have tails, but half dragons do have tails. That's the difference with tails. But that is actually that's a really interesting thing, because you can just homebrew it that dragonborn do have tails.
Right.
But
right.
That is cut off, and that's a cool way of doing that.
Because you could easily you just take the entire thing that D&D already gave you and then just add a small tiny chunk to the dragonborn culture, and then you already have like this expansive dragonborn culture. Yeah. So yeah, that could be something we could easily dive into. As for world creation itself,
I know world creation is a hard one to make important to a story, because I know our group that we play in, we are very excited about world lore, and we love to just like sit in a library and just roll research rolls and learn about the world that we're in. But
like my party just finished in the Underdark doing all sorts of different. Well, they're still in the Underdark, but they just finished like not researching about the Underdark, but learning about its culture and its customs from things that they are trying to do. So
I know that I've heard that's not very common. A lot of people don't like that part of it, and like my group, I know they're not the biggest fans of world lore. I mean,
I've only heard stories.
they'll indulge every so often, like, because we do have a wizard and he loves to learn and whatnot, but it's clearly not the rest of the party's thing. And so making a world creation myth or story important is, or at least learnable, is hard to do in a way that will interest the party always.
Yeah, I mean, how my world does it, I guess this kind of relates. How my world does it, I mean, there's kind of like this massive civil war between the good gods and bad gods, essentially, like demons and good gods. So you could easily, I mean, even with D&D lore, you could just take the idea of a single god creating this whole universe, and then kind of like they already had, which was like this big civil war, you could essentially make an entire conflict around a civil war around creation, and then you could already have like a whole D&D story about a civil war. And people make characters, and then they choose sides, and you could have a whole party just going through.
It's kind of like cavemen. It's like early, super early D&D setting where the gods are still
Yeah.
in the middle of creation and they're fighting.
Yeah. I mean, you don't even have to. Yeah, you don't even have to necessarily do like cavemen. I mean, that could also be an option, but you could even do like advanced civilizations, like the gods just created them advanced, and then
say like a kind of world where everything is super advanced, but there's no history behind it. It just is.
Well, like you're creating. Like the best part about that would be the players are creating the history even more so than you are in a normal game, because there is none. Like it's like the gods have just finished their creation process.
Yeah.
Like how I did it in my world is demon lords are bad gods, quotations, and then essentially the gods of light are good gods, and the gods of light, each god and each demon lord has their own plane, and they created races, and then the material plane was essentially empty. It pretty much always existed, but it was essentially empty. And so the gods of light wanted the material plane, and the demon lords wanted the material plane. So they created their own races and had this huge civil war. And then you could, for example, in my world, you could easily start a campaign where that civil war is just now unfolding to take over the material plane. So that's kind of like you could borrow that kind of stuff with D&D and already just like create a whole entire system around that kind of concept of this civil war, of this creation process. Even if you wanted to go back to like the two different planets splitting, you could even do something where like two different planets are fighting at war because they're different backgrounds, like two different gods essentially. And that would take, obviously, making your own homebrew world takes time, pretty much as it is.
And so
but that could be something
I think your idea is actually really good for that kind of person who is scared to make a huge amount of lore and a huge amount of world. Especially for certain campaigns where people are not interested in that lore. And so by having the world be that new, you don't have to create that much lore. You just have to create what's there.
Yeah. Just create something that like...
Because it was just recently created.
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously you're still going to have, cities and stuff like that just for, players to do something in the world. Like, you're going to have them interact with stuff. But you can, there can be very minimal creation process on the DM's part, and kind of let the characters forge, which you kind of want to do anyways, but kind of let the characters forge their own history, even more so in a more exaggerated way. Like you could even have them found cities if you wanted, or nations and stuff like that. You could even do another process kind of along the similar lines of Dragonborn in this world, but a freeing the slaves type of situation from their gods or from their captors. So like Dragonborn and Dragons, for example. You could even do a whole campaign where like your party is like trying to free groups that are enslaved, like just have that kind of wrap around in your world. And then you again don't have to create a whole lot, but it's still kind of like this huge overarching storyline to your campaign where a certain group is enslaved, and you can present different atrocities that are happening, and that automatically kind of motivates your players to go and do something about it. I mean, I could go on and on, but I could also see, even just like looking at D&D lore, not Lord. They have like one place where all the campaign settings take place in,
So no, that's the thing. Like, that this is 5th edition. This is 5th edition, and Forgotten Realms has been around for a bit, but they really focused on it in 5th edition. And they've done that for every edition, is they have kind of a thing they focus on, and most of their stuff comes out for that thing. And
even
they've actually created like so many worlds, like it's kind of ridiculous, but they kind of just focus each edition. They've been focusing more and more on a specific thing.
I mean, even then, it can still go to show you that they have this huge world, but like 5th edition campaign settings are focused on a small part of that world, like a tiny part of that world.
Yeah.
And then a few other different planes here and there. So, I mean, like, even like jumping into it as somebody like a new DM, you don't really have to make that much in terms of places and, nations and stuff like that. You can get away with a lot of simple kind of start small.
Yeah, one of
Pretty
the
easily.
things for start small that I've always liked is kind of like a kind of post-apocalyptic one where
Yeah,
you really get to flesh out one city. It is your
yeah,
trade hub. That is where
yeah,
everything starts, and then they have to slowly go out and retake things. And so
yeah,
all they will be discovering lore as you build it, kind of, and you'll
yeah,
have these
yeah,
runes and dungeons that they get to go out, and it'll be interesting for every sort of player because it'll be interesting for the lore getters like us because we're finding this ancient thing that
learning.
was here. And then it's also interesting for people who just want to fight through a dungeon and allow the
Yeah,
nerds back at base to come in and do all the research.
yep, yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if you remember the world that I kind of made that was kind of based off that idea where I had like that bubble
Yeah,
that
I
was
remember
like,
that.
yeah, where we played for like what, one session, two.
Yeah, well, I think it was
Like,
actually
it
3.
was over Discord, and it was over
It was I
Discord. It
enjoyed
just
it.
did not
I
work very
really
well.
wanted to play that Necromancer Wizard so bad. I
Yeah,
loved that backstory.
yeah.
I was so excited to get revenge on his father.
It just didn't. It just didn't.
Just didn't
Just
work
didn't
out.
work over Discord. But even then, like with that world, it was really small. It was like one section that was saved from impending doom, essentially, and started the campaign off in a small town where the impending doom kind of encroached in the safe zone, essentially, in like the safe space that you guys had, and you guys were the ones like having to flee from it and then deliver the news to a more civilized, like a bigger city, essentially, than your
Yeah.
town. So even then, like with that campaign, I didn't make hardly any. I just made the town. Like for the first session, I just made the town, some of the people in the town, the shops and stuff like that. And that's kind of like starting small is a really good way to start your D&D game, because
And
if you
it
start
helps.
too much, you can
Yeah, you can
get
burn
super
yourself out
overwhelmed.
before you even have a session 1 by trying
Yeah.
to create too much. Now, I am the person who will create a whole bunch, like so much. Like I created my
Yeah.
whole current world that I'm playing through in my current campaign over a whole summer. Over last summer, I just spent, not this one we just passed, but the one before it. I took a trip to Denver. I did all these things, but over that whole time, I was creating new giant races and new, like the Nitasu, the bear race. I created a crocodon, the crocodile race, and like all these things. And I just spent so much time, and I really didn't have to because like they've never been to the north of my nation.
Yeah.
We've been playing for 28 sessions. They're high level.
Yeah.
And never been to the north, never seen all these stuff up there.
Yeah,
Some of their backstories are there, never been there.
Yeah, my campaign's going on 2 years, and they're level 15 right now. I'm planning on getting them to level 20, and they haven't left the nation that they started the game in.
Wow, that's
yeah. So you don't need to make my world is massive, and there's a lot to it. But I also did kind of a similar thing where I kind of like I knew I wanted to play D&D, and so I kind of made this huge world, and then kind of like once I got my players, kind of like, okay, well, I guess we're here now, and threw them in because I had like a whole year where I didn't do a whole lot, and I just kind of made D&D stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of,
and that is the thing. If you're a new DM or want to start creating a world, if you don't have any players, just if you're feeling like working on a world, do it, because like Aaron, he didn't have players, he didn't have a group, but he's like, I'm gonna DM and I want to have a cool world, and so he just started making it before he even had a group, and now he's running a group through it because he did put in that time and the effort to make that beautiful world.
Yeah.
And I've actually played a few one-shots in that world, and I look forward to doing another one in January.
Yeah, true. True. It's tradition.
It's tradition now.
Yep.
I get a birthday one-shot in his world.
I was also thinking too, I was just looking at the map because, again, my knowledge is what you just told me. And I was looking at the map, and you could easily also take, for example, you could make Europe in your world, put it down, like bam, you have Europe, and then you could make the Americas as uncharted areas, and then you can just put ruins and things all around there and make a whole campaign about exploring the uncharted territories. And there you
And
go.
what
You
I
have
would
a
do,
whole,
which would be really like cheeky, but would be super easy to do and really fun, is literally put them in the major points where the Aztecs and Maya, like the actual civilizations that were here before, actually had like their temples and whatnot. And so they're traveling.
You can steal names
exactly
too if you want. Nobody knows.
Yeah, exactly.
You could, I mean, the average person, your average player probably doesn't know too much about any of that civilization, so you could steal names as long as they're not too well known, but you could steal
I mean, you could steal names. You could literally steal layouts if they're good enough for a dungeon, like or they have to climb up like these Machu Picchu and like actual like places that you can literally look at pictures of and figure out the geometry or slightly alter it. And most people would never know, because you're playing it in a D&D world, and so you feel like it's this whole thing.
Different. Yeah, absolutely. So you could make an entire campaign with literally one city. You could make one city that they started in, and then through that session 1, or the next few sessions, they end up getting essentially shipped across the sea to an uncharted area, and then you have a whole campaign setting.
I kind of freaking love just the idea of just like starting them out on the boat there.
Yeah, you could do that too.
I mean, I would talk to the players and be like, "Hey, is this a campaign you would want to go in?" And then what I did for this current campaign is I gave them 3 options. It was like, which one do you want to start out? Actually, I did that for my first campaign. I was like, "Hey, here's like 5 missions. Which one you want to take?" And all your characters will be going there. And kind of set it up as these are the what type of game do you want to play as well. So it's not just these are the missions, but these will be the missions I'm going to try to kind of keep making for you because these are what you like.
It's definitely important to get like everybody wants to have fun at the D&D table. So it's important to kind of get your players, when you do something like that, especially kind of like the players, what they want to play. Do they want to play a more dungeon crawl game? Do they want to play a more lore based game, a more like political intrigue based game? There's all sorts of different styles of D&D. I mean, my current campaign is going through a pretty heavily political side. So they've been doing like last 2 sessions have been pretty much no combat, and they've been doing political intrigue the whole last 2 sessions. So like there's all sorts of
mine's currently
styles
there because they're kind of dealing with huge issues. And they're like, we got to get more people on our side. And so even though they don't want to be political, like they're not hugely into that, and they're still enjoying it, but it doesn't feel like it's as political as like your games, I'm sure, are. And so even like recruiting an army doesn't have to feel as political if the group doesn't enjoy political.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's really up to the games that you want to run and your players want to play. So you can take all sorts of different stuff from here and easily plop it into your world and just kind of reskin it, recode it. Just like you were to like take a monster and reskin a monster. You could do that kind of stuff with just this lore that they've got for you.
Yeah.
Just reskin it. Make it a little bit different in your own. Really, 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 I wouldn't say easy, but it definitely can feel less daunting.
Easier than it'll definitely feel less daunting.
Feels less daunting than like having to create your own huge expanse.
Which honestly, I think once you get comfortable with it, starting off at that base of nothing and just creating, there's something really nice about that. But I know it's scary for those who are not used to it yet.
Yeah,
but once you get started, and even if it's just like I had a friend who was super nervous, so he never wanted to create his own world. He never wanted to stretch and do anything like that, and that's totally okay. But he kind of eventually he approached me and was like, "Hey, like I kind of want to start doing this, and I know you do that a lot. Like, can you help me and whatnot?" And so we started him out simply. He just simply wanted to create a unique monster that was not in the campaign that he was running, which was Curse of Strahd. And so he just worked, and we came up with some unique abilities that it had and whatnot, and kind of figured out what level the party should be to face it. And he had a lot of fun running it, and it kind of encouraged him to keep going and slowly change a few more things and a few more things. And
yeah, the best part about D&D too is that like your players are also playing with you, and they actively are like creating lore and stuff with you. So you can even like when you're playing the game actively, you can listen to what your players are saying and then be like, Yep, that's exactly what happened.
I think that is. I've gotten some of my best ideas from just creating like a really basic thing, and then they'd be like, have this crazy like, like the huge like it's all a conspiracy and like this whole thing, and I'm like, that's exactly what it is. Literally, I was playing yesterday.
That happened.
I was playing yesterday, and they were meeting this group called the Chantry, and they're just this kind of very evil group and whatnot. And the main guy, the head of it, was this old man called the Divine Nikolaus. And he had I explained that he had this robe on. It was white and gold. And immediately the wizard was like freaking out. And he posted in the Discord the robe of the Archmagi. And the picture for it is a white and gold robe. And I'm like, I didn't plan on that. He is definitely wearing that, though.
That's what he's got. Yeah. Yeah.
All
sorts of stuff like that.
So much, yes. Because it would fit. I mean, he could totally use it. It would totally be useful for him. And it would actually make sense that he would have one.
Yeah.
And it was it just a small thing. But it added to this shock that the person had. Is like, oh.
Yeah.
And so just using the knowledge that your players have and kind of like piggybacking off it, but you don't always have to tell them like, I'm piggybacking off it.
No.
I mean, sometimes it's fun. Like with him, I did tell him, I was like, I did not plan that. Definitely putting that on him now. But I didn't tell the rest of the party because they enjoy but he enjoys knowing that type of stuff. And so I was like, I'll give you that little bit of joy because you're all playing a game and you're all trying to have fun. And so whatever way that you have fun and your players have fun best is the best way to do it.
I mean, even in like an example in my world is I created this hive mind, which is their big bad evil guy is the head of the hive mind essentially. And if they kill the hive mind dies essentially how it works. And that kind of originally came about because I was lazy in making a society, and I originally had created it too big and too like difficult for them to take, and so I wanted to like fast track how they could defeat this whole society on their own, like as 4 or 5 party members, 5 heroes essentially taking on an entire civilization. And so kind of like instead of like a Lord of the Rings where you throw the ring in and the whole civilization crumbles, it was more of you kill the bat, you kill the head of the snake and the snake dies. And so that's how that sprouted of, I mean, it was originally a hive mind, but it was meant to be like it wasn't meant to be you kill the hive and you kill the head of the hive and it all dies. But that kind of like out of my, I mean, I don't want to say laziness, but it was more of like a lack of preparation, I guess. That kind of led to, that's how the entire campaign is unfolding, is they have to go kill this one singular entity that's over the entirety of the hive mind. And so even then, like I created one civilization,
but see,
and the whole entire campaign revolved around
as
it.
You called it laziness, has created this suspense in your campaign of this huge, powerful being, and now it's this really cool big bad evil guy that you never would have had before, but now you do because you were quotation marks lazy and wanted to and but now it's this awesome thing, and that's with homebrew. A lot of times it can start out as this, I just want to quickly throw something in, and then it becomes so much more important.
It branches.
Like an offhanded comment, and then you're like, oh wait, but that could be really cool, or that could be this. And so,
I mean, another example.
You can go for
another example with that same group was that like, my players were investigating, so they ended up making their way into one of like the strongholds of this hive mind. They were trying to take the hive mind itself was trying to take over the city, and they ended up making their way into the stronghold and like investigating around, and they ended up making this whole entire like conspiracy theory that what if this hive mind could also kind of put their spawn, I guess, into like items into like watch, so they could like see through these items. So when a member of the hive mind dies, they essentially turn into this like sludge, and they can move and crawl around and see and hear, and then communicate with the hive mind itself. In order to kill it, you have to deal radiant damage to kill the member outright. And so they came up with this huge conspiracy theory that like the sludge, when they die, can like go into items and they can use that to spy. And so that created an entire arc of them going around the city and trying to find these items that which the hive mind had kind of embedded itself into in order to spy on the city. And that was not planned at all. that just like grew
I
up.
heard
That
so
just
much about
happened
that.
with
I
the
had no
players.
idea that came about that way.
No, none. It originally did not happen at all. It was supposed to be loot in barrels. There was a bunch of gold that was supposed to be looted, like a bunch of gold in barrels, but they had covered it with essentially the sludge to like hide that they were trying to use this money. And the party went on this whole entire like, this is how they're corrupting it. This is what's going on, and they are spying on everybody in the city by going into everybody's gold, and that's how it was born. So
Which
that's how it
actually
ended up working.
there's really well-known lore and whatnot, books and whatnot that deal with like corrupted gold and whatnot, and so that's already like a really cool storyline that people love to use. And your players were just suggested it to you, and now it's super cool.
They made it up on the spot, and then I created it.
I've heard some crazy stories that like of like where the story was gonna go, with like these huge moments where these spies that were in the gold were used, and that's all an idea based on your player suggestion, which is super cool.
Yeah. So I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to create a really interesting and intriguing game, because a lot of the times the players create it for you. So you can take anything from this like D&D lore, like anything from D&D lore, kind of reskin it and place it in your world, and then watch your players just run with it. You can make an entire campaign that way if you want.
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty cool campaign. Just and you could literally, it doesn't even have to be D&D lore or fantasy lore.
No.
Like I have a nation in my game called Crodane. Crodane is, I made it like Sparta, but if Sparta had an outlet for all of its kind of the way that its society ran, and kind of how it uplifted this kind of athletic and good fighting and all that kind of stuff. And I gave a reason for it. They're protecting the world from this horrible valley that seems to almost like create monsters. And so if a monster escapes, the fighters of Crudane are right there to take it down, because Crudane is the nation that has this valley in it. And so these society that praises people for having these abilities, there's a reason for it. They praise them because they are what is needed to protect the world. And they kind of take it on themselves and have this pride that we are the best because they're doing this selfless thing. The whole nation is.
Yeah. And you could even make a whole campaign off that if you wanted to, you know? Like, you could just that single small, like place, you could make the entire world about that. And then like you can get into all sorts of D&D lore with monsters and all sorts of different stuff, and you can just borrow and take. You can just, that's what it's there for. You can use it. You can use all sorts of stuff like that. Just reskin it and put it in your world. Yeah,
and I think that's the best type of homebrew. That it's so simple, but even that was like, for my friend, it was too nerve-wracking. Like he didn't even consider it when I brought it up with him. That you don't even have to change a stat block. You don't have to edit anything.
Nope.
Just configure how it looks. Just describe it differently, and you already know the stat block is well suited for the level.
Yep.
And you don't have to change damage output. You don't change anything. Just change how it looks.
Yep. And I mean, and if you're worried, you can even change mid-combat. You're the DM. You can do whatever you want. You can do all sorts of different stuff. You can, all of a sudden, you can give it 100 more HP.
Was one of the most nerve-wracking things that I had to do. Or figure, like, when I finally, like, got the confidence to do that, to change a battle mid-battle.
Yep.
Because you're like, no, this is leveled, this should be done. And I know there are people who are very much against DM trickery, quotation marks. And I have limited that as best as I can. When it comes down to it, I let my players know, hey, this big bad person that's nearly killing you, he has this many hit points left. And I roll out in the open and be like, hey, we're all going to let the dice fall where they may.
Yeah.
And I feel so bad for my party because I did this, and we've had two moments where they're trying to stop this horrible thing from happening. One time it was the summoning of this supposedly evil god, and the second time was a corrupted god was trying to kill this ancient dragon that was a friend of theirs that was kind of the tutor of one of the characters. And both times I was like, this is how many hit points they have. And they had like 3 or 4 turns to get them, and they just weren't able to do it. And both times they lost, and it was just because of how the dice rolled.
Yeah. It happens in D&D. So, and being a first-time DM, you figure that out real quick, that, combats need to be, in many cases, adjusted in the middle of combat. Now, you can obviously avoid that, but there are times where you just make a combat and you're like, well, this is not going the way I thought.
That's why I always like, there's like certain abilities that you can add to a character, like they start doing weaker damage once they've taken a certain amount of hit points of damage. They kind of are weaker and they can't hit as strong or whatnot. And you can kind of weaken them that way by being like, oh man, he seems to be limping, or his arm seems to be hurt in some way, and so he can't swing. And you can just describe it in a way that makes it sound like you're not actually making it easier on them. This person's just taken that much damage, or they've reached this next stage.
Yeah, you can do all sorts of different stuff with like different conditions and like bloodied conditions and stuff like that, which are optional rules. But yeah, like I said, creating your own world, and especially with all the good stuff that D&D's already given you, you can make a world really fast, really easily, and just kind of let your players do a lot of the work. Happens a ton. I know that's how Chris can DM oftentimes. So it definitely is a strategy to DM.
Chris is the DM for the game we're both players in, for those of you listening.
Yeah.
I was actually watching a Matt Colville video. It was a really good one. He was talking about railroading in sandbox games, and he was describing a movie, which I don't want to spoil it for you because it's actually a really good video. So if you should watch it, anybody listening.
No, yeah.
Aaron, if you haven't watched it, he's describing a movie that we all know, and he describes one of them, the start of it, as the DM John shows everybody this beautiful map that he's worked really hard on, and there's all these different cities and whatnot on it. The players all become super interested in one part of the map, and they're like, "What's this? Like, what's out here? What?" And so even though he didn't have it, he knew lore about it. Like, he knew a lot of stuff about it because this is just describing a movie, which it's all already figured out. But it's a way you could DM it where you just show them a map that you create. It doesn't even have to be that detailed. Just put some dots on there where there's cities, and kind of just have a basic idea, and let them be like, I want to start there. I want to go there. And then all you create is just there to there. You don't have to create the whole world. They've seen that. Yep. Just create there to there, and random encounters they'll experience on the road, and just things that you can fill the world out without actually having to literally fill the world out.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Because I think that's one of my biggest issues with my current campaign, which I love them to death, but they are very indecisive. When they will, at the end of a session, be like, okay, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do next session. The start of next session, they discuss what they should do again, and they decide something completely different.
They change it.
And so I've created all this stuff.
I don't think that's a you problem.
Okay, glad it's not just a me
that
problem.
In every session.
And so I have to quickly be like, okay, I have to create or figure out this other thing, which luckily I've been able to use what I have. And so I've been slowly figuring out how to create encounters and whatnot that I could move, and so they don't have to
move. Yeah, I do that all the time.
They don't have to be there. So even like this, when I just talked about previously, where there's this corrupted god that they had to fight. Originally, they were just going to fight the corrupted god within this other area. During the session, they decided, no, we're not going to go up to that area anymore, and we're going to go try to do this other thing. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll figure it out. And so I was like, the people that corrupted this god and all this stuff, it actually would make sense that he would come down and he would attack this where they're at and what they're doing, because he would want to kill this dragon. And it was perfect. And it actually made a lot of sense that he would be hired or corrupted and controlled to kill this dragon because this dragon is in the way of their plans. And so even though they didn't go anywhere near where I thought they would go, it made sense. And it carried a really cool encounter where there's this god and a dragon that are fighting. And it was this really cool scene in the throne room where they come in as they hear the alarms and they see this dragon fighting this giant god, and it's beautiful. Yeah. It's a really cool scene.
I mean, that's another thing you can... Yeah, it's another thing you can do with D&D lore is like they have one god who created the whole world, and you could easily just have that god get corrupted, and then the entire story is the player is trying to either uncorrupt it or kill it, whichever way you want. And that's just already something that is, made for you right there. And you just all of a sudden throw into the equation of this god got corrupted and now is doing all sorts of evils or like injustice all over the world. And so your party then sees these things and starts to go for it. Starts to try and either uncorrupt the god or kill it. So, I mean, even then, there's another one just right there that can build off the whole idea that D&D lore already had and create a whole entire campaign off of it. And it's just really helpful to, like, even read through some of the lore just to, like, get basic fun ideas, even if it's just something that's slightly different. That's what it's there for.
Even if you have, like, a favorite video game or a favorite book or whatever, even if it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever it is, there's stuff in there that is always usable in D&D. Like every book, every single book has something. It doesn't matter how young it is. I'm trying to think of something I could use from, like,
Lord of the Rings is a really good example.
Well, I was thinking of like a child book because Lord of the Rings is like fantasy already. I mean, so I'm thinking like, what could you take from
story?
The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
You could do like Hansel and Gretel and make a whole entire witch arc about it.
That is true.
There's these evil witches that are in a cottage and they're taking people and using their. I think Curse of Strahd kind of does this, but like taking people from a city and eating them or something. Like you could do anything like that. And there you go. You have an entire beginning arc all the way till level 5. Like
which bam. If you can create it like with enough intrigue, which there is easy ways to do that, and you can also look at like modules because there's. Matt Colville has created with other people, he created a module lookup website. I can't remember what it's called, but you can look up like specific stuff like this type of module that has conspiracies and all this stuff. And you can look at how this module suggests you should run that, or how you can, if you're too scared, too nervous to try all this political intrigue or whatnot, there are modules and things that can help you because they were made for teaching people to do that.
Yep. Exactly. Or even just taking like NPCs from modules and putting them in your world if you wanted. They have personalities and characters and all sorts of stuff that you can take and use. And you immediately just put an interesting character, especially if your players haven't played any of those modules.
Also, one of the nice things about taking characters from modules is that if they're modern modules, they already have a stat block.
Super helpful. Really, really helpful.
You want to make them an enemy, or you want to take them to be the big bad? Boom, you got a stat block. Yep,
there you go. It's already done for you. So, like we said, starting a world doesn't take as much as a lot of people think. And when you have all this lore that's already made for you, you can build off of all sorts of cool stuff off of this. And I mean, even take me, I don't even know anything about D&D lore, and I still made a world. Just it's easier than I think people make it out to be and think that it is in their mind at the beginning. And once you start playing, especially too, things just build and grow.
Yeah, well, thank you for
we've been going on for what, like an hour and a half?
No, it feels like it, but it's not been that long.
It's almost an hour at least. So
it's an hour and 4 minutes so far, but I was hoping to get an hour 10, but I think we'll cut it here. Thank you for listening to the our first episode
of our ever episode.
Of our hopefully long running podcast, Dungeoneered.
Heck yeah.
We hope we've encouraged you and uplifted you to feel confident to make your own world and use the tools out there.
Absolutely. It's all there for the taking.
Yep. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.